Hey guys, this painting is on textures and we're going to be creating two specific kinds of textures in this painting of the elephant. The textures are the wrinkles of the elephant's skin. And by the way, the skin on many elephants is 1 inch or more thick because it's very wrinkled. All of that wrinkle creates more texture and it is an insulation or a buffer from the hot sun. The other texture that we're creating is a lot of water spatters, And so guys, if you are interested in creating textures, then this is the video for you. And if you're curious what I'm drinking, it is dark roast black coffee, cold, right out of the refrigerator, and it is fueling my paintbrush. Okay, so before we go any further, I do want to give a great big shout out to Bernd Adner of Wildlife-TV. He is an awesome videographer of animals and wildlife, and he has kindly given me the permission to paint anything I want off of his channel. Of course, I always ask, and he always says yes, so thank you, Bernd. So this particular picture is coming from one of his videos. I'll have it linked below. The two babies I really liked. The background elephant is really beautiful in the photography, but I wanted to paint something that had more leather and the face to be more visible. And so I went on Unsplash and found this large elephant. I will have that linked below also. And I'm going to be marrying these 3 elephants to create this painting. And one more time, a very big thank you to Bernd. So I started with the underpainting, and the underpainting needs to be a clear light color that's bright, and it's going to peek through the darker colors that we put on top. This is watercolor painting after all. After I put on the sky and the sea colors, I realized, oh, the purple, the maroon actually, might discolor some of that sky. And so I decided to dry this layer and then put on a separate layer for the underpainting for the elephants. And by the way, guys, if you like watercolor and this particular style of watercolor that tells kind of a story as you paint, then maybe you want to check out my Patreon. I have a lot of watercolor paintings there. Each painting is 1 to 3 hours long. There's always a traceable included, and I give clear step-by-step instructions. And if you are interested, there is a link below. So once we have our first layer down, it is then time to start building up a little bit more color. And you can see I'm adding a little bit more of the purpling on the ends of the elephant ears and around the trunks, deepening the shadows. In these shadow areas that I am painting wet into damp, it's no longer wet into wet, I'm getting some blurs of color. This is the underpainting for the wrinkles later. So right now on this damp area, I'm blurring out some more of the colors. The next layer is going to be for the details. We'll be painting wet onto possibly dry paper. The paper is completely dry now, so if I feel that an area doesn't have enough background color where I want to put some wrinkles, then I will dampen that area, drop in a little paint, and then come back later when it's drier and touch in my wrinkles. You can't really put wrinkles down if you don't have a little bit of a background blur. Okay, so a lot of these areas, like on the trunk or the ends of the ears, you can see that I'm adding quite a bit of detail. And this detail isn't really specific. I am using a wider brush and a soft touch, and my paint is quite watery. In the next layer, when I do more painting with those wrinkles, I will have a neater paint. That means I won't have much water in it, and I'll be using my very fine brush lightly. This is my finest brush right now, but I will be using it much lighter with a very gentle touch when I draw in some of those really fine wrinkles. Now, this little elephant, he didn't have much detailing, and so I had to dampen him first and then put in some background color before I could touch in some of those wrinkles. Now, because there isn't a lot of color here, I am putting on layer on layer on layer, and I have to wait until one layer has dried a little bit before I can add another color. Otherwise, I'm not going to get detailing, I'm just going to get blurring. And if you are curious about my brushes, I have a silver black velvet size 4, which has a very large barrel, fine point, and I can get so many details. I'm also using a script liner in this, and then I'm using a fine liner for the very, very fine details. All of these details are below. You can just check them out if you have any questions about the colors or the brushes that I'm using. As for the sky, I am using my very beautiful, I love this guy, silver black velvet cat's tongue. And it holds tons of water. It's really good for those skies, and I get these sweeping water wave movements with this, just with a side slash with my brush. It is amazing. I strongly recommend it. And I can get quite a bit of detail with the tip of that brush too. Truly an amazing brush. Okay, now guys, I am taking or trying to take off the masking. This paper is my Fabriano Aquarello, and it is sadly 25% cotton. Honestly, I actually like it. It's pretty good paper for putting on the layers. It's rather inexpensive. It's cold press, and I normally use hot press, but it's okay as long as I'm not using lots of water. But this is my first time to really use the masking fluid, and it didn't come off. So right now I am taking my Ecoline ink. It's a watercolor ink. It's very opaque. I like it much better than gouache, and if you have a question about that, I will link in a comparison video if you want to compare the Ecoline ink and the gouache. Anyway, I am covering up the masking that I couldn't lift. It's kind of staining the paper, so I'm putting some of that ink on top. I'm also getting some great contrast, some water textures, and I don't use only white ink for that water texture. Sometimes I'm using a spatter of colors. If there's a blue wave, I will use a very dark blue spatter on top of that wave. If there is a red reflection, I will use a very dark maroon red spatter there. So this is how I am building up the color. Then, on top of that colored spatter, I add the Ecoline white, and that's what I'm doing right now. And this is how to build up a lot of detail and make it look more realistic, more three-dimensional. You can see that I'm touching a little bit of the Ecoline ink also along some of those wrinkles on the elephants, just to pick out a little bit of highlight. Some of my colors got rather dark, and I can pick out great highlight with the Ecoline ink. We are in the final strokes of this painting, and I will say that if you want really good three-dimensional viewing, then take a darker color, and it doesn't have to be black or Payne's gray, it can be a darker blue, but put a little bit of a dark color under each of your little spatters that you did with the white ink. You might even take a little bit of the maroon, and in the center of the larger spatters put a little maroon swipe, and then you will have what looks like a real water droplet floating in the air. Well guys, this is the end of today's tutorial. I hope you picked up not only watercolor tips, but ideas about painting materials that you can use. If you are interested in watercolor painting tutorials, please do check out my Patreon. And guys, I will see all of you on the next upload.